You most likely know about the awful human experiments conducted by the Nazis with associated names like Albert Heim and Joseph Mengele, but the Germans' partners in crime, the Japanese, who sometimes committed even more horrifying war crimes, are oftentimes left out. Therefore, I'm going to tell you a little story about the Unit 731. This entire story starts in 1930 Japan, where the Japanese War Ministry is pressured by multiple scientists to create the Japanese Biological Weapons Research Program. These scientists saw the effective German use of biological weapons in World War I and wanted to replicate and improve upon the idea of biological weapons. One of the main scientists pushing for the creation of Biological Weapons Research Program was Shiro Ishii. He got his wish, and in 1932, following the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, Shiro Ishii along with Sadao Araki became the heads of Army Epidemic Prevention Research Laboratory. Within this division, Shiro organized a secret unit called the Togo unit for various biological and chemical experiments within Manchuria. Manchuria was perfect for such a unit, as human test subjects could be plucked from the streets like rats. Togo unit started its first experiments in a prison camp called Zhongma Fortress. Zhongma Fortress was constructed by Chinese local conscripts, which were for all intensive purposes used like slaves, who were forced to wear blinders so they wouldn't see what they were building. The builders that were used to construct the more sensitive areas of the compound, the medical and surgical laboratories, were executed to ensure absolute secrecy. After it was finished, the fortress could hold up to 1,000 prisoners, but only held around 500 prisoners at any given moment. Prisoners included common criminals, captured bandits, anti-Japanese partisans, political prisoners, and people rounded up on fake charges by the Kempeitai, aka Japanese Gestapo. The prisoners were always well fed because the researchers needed healthy subjects for their experiments. The human experiments conducted at Zhongma Fortress included, but were not limited to, draining of blood over several days with well-kept records on the deteriorating physical condition, nutrient and water deprivation again with well-kept records on deteriorating physical condition, injection of various types of microbes, bacteria and viruses. And all of this while conducting experimental and research surgeries on the subjects, oftentimes with no anesthesia. The prisoners who were able to survive the experiments were killed, again to ensure absolute secrecy. Due to this, the average life expectancy of a prisoner in Zhongma Fortress was about a month. However, in 1934, some of the prisoners managed to escape and spread the word about the horrifying experiments done in the Zhongma Fortress. Now with all eyes on the fortress, Ishii couldn't afford to continue with the experiments and eventually closed down the Zhongma Fortress. However, the experiments that the Ishii and the Togo unit conducted in the Zhongma Fortress were sadly just a precursor to what's to come. With the Zhongma Fortress closed, Ishii needed a new place where to conduct his experiments. And in 1936, authorized by the imperial decree and with new funds, Ishii constructed the Unit 731. The subjects of Unit 731 were selected the same way like the subjects in the Zhongma Fortress, however with one key difference. Unit 731 scientists demanded a wide variety of people, and therefore the subjects in the unit ranged from infants to pregnant women, from Chinese to Russian, and even some captured ally soldiers. The experiments conducted in Unit 731 expanded upon the ones conducted in the Zhongma Fortress. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail here since I still want you to sleep tonight. However, a large part of all the experiments conducted in Unit 731 involved vivisections. If you don't know what that is, it looks like this when done to a rat. Vivisections were apparently an integral part of the research as they helped the scientists understand how the bacteria, virus, or chemical weapons affected different parts of the body. These vivisections were done without anesthesia while the subjects were alive, as the scientists feared the anesthetics and decomposition process might hamper the results. Other kinds of experiments included frostbite testing, weapon testing, syphilis testing, with subjects being forced to have sex with each other or be killed, rape and forced pregnancy by Japanese scientists, and radiation testing, just to name a few. All of the subjects that survived any of the testing died during the vivisections afterwards. Sadly, Unit 731, even though being the largest human experimentation laboratory, wasn't the only one in Imperial Japan. There was Unit 100 conducting experiments with animal diseases on humans, and many other smaller units, which to this day we don't know much about. Not to even mention the participation of various Japanese universities in some of the research. All of these tests resulted in large-scale experiments? Or more like genocides, conducted on the Chinese populations. These included, but were not limited to, spread of cholera, bubonic plague, anthrax, tularemia, adducta. One such experiment, done with the cholera and anthrax, which were spread through clothing, contaminated supplies, and airdrops, killed over 400,000 Chinese civilians. However, the attempts by Ishii to use these biological weapons in the Pacific War were shut down by the Japanese military as they saw no major applications. Towards the end of the war, experimentation slowed down as the Japanese Empire had bigger problems to worry about. In 1945, with the Red Army advancing into China, where majority of the experimental units were located, the entire Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department shut down and all the scientists returned to Japan after blowing up and destroying all the evidence of all the units. In Japan, the scientists involved with the experimentations were given potassium cyanide vials and were told to take the secret to the grave if interrogated. However, this didn't happen, and after Japan was occupied, most of the scientists exchanged information from experiments for immunity. The Soviets weren't too hasty to convict the Japanese scientists as they wanted the information, but more importantly had thousands of Japanese POWs which they didn't want to release and also didn't want to draw attention to them by putting Japanese scientists on trial. Of course, the Soviets denied any of this. Americans, on the other hand, wanted to develop biological weapons of their own, due to, you know. Therefore, they needed all the information they could get from the Japanese scientists, and that is why almost no Japanese scientists were put on trial for their actions in human experimentations. Of course, the US denied any of this. Even the main instigator of the entire project, Hiro Ishii, was never put on trial and was given immunity by the Americans. In the end, the history is always written by the victors, and that is why the Japanese war crimes aren't talked about as much, as the American and Soviet governments tried to hide the information from the public for their own benefits.